The Surrender and the Journey. West May 14th, 1943, Bizerte, Tunisia. The sand still carries the heat of battle. German helmets lie half buried in the dust, the last echoes of the Afrika Korps fading beneath the weight of surrender. Along a dirt road, hundreds of prisoners shuffle forward, sunburned, hollow-eyed, their once proud uniforms streaked with sweat and grime. Among them is Gefreiter Karl Hoffmann, 23 years old, who hasn't seen a real meal or a real bath in months. His boots are falling apart, his canteen long empty. The Americans watch silently as the column passes. Their uniforms are clean, their weapons polished. Karl expects the sneers, the jeers, maybe the rifle butt to the ribs, but instead a tall GI with a southern drawl steps forward, offering a tin cup filled with water. "Here, fella, you look cooked." Karl hesitates, staring at the cup. Back home, Goebbels' deck radio had painted these men as savages, half-breeds with no discipline, no honor. Yet this one's face carries neither hate nor triumph, only quiet fatigue. Karl drinks. The water tastes impossibly clean. Days later, the prisoners are herded aboard a gray Liberty ship. The engines rumble beneath their feet as the coast of Africa fades into the horizon. Each man carries his own dread of what awaits them. They imagine chains, beatings, starvation, punishment for a lost war. But on the second morning, the ship's cook shouts from the galley, handing out metal trays piled with scrambled eggs and bread still warm from the oven. Karl stares at it in disbelief. "This is for us?" The cook grins. "You ain't dead, are ya?" By the time they reach the Gulf of Mexico, the prisoners have begun to whisper among themselves. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe the Americans weren't monsters after all. When the Liberty ship docks at Galveston, Texas, the air hits them like a furnace. Trucks wait on the pier, surrounded by MPs with sidearms and mirrored sunglasses. As they climb aboard, Karl catches glimpses of the strange new world beyond the docks. Billboards for Coca-Cola, children waving tiny flags, the smell of roasted peanuts from a nearby stand. It all feels too normal for a land at war. Hours later, the convoy turns off the highway onto a dusty road lined with pecan trees. A sign comes into view. Camp Hearn, U.S., Army Internment Facility. Inside, the men brace for the worst. They expect cages. Instead, they find neat rows of wooden barracks, trimmed lawns, and a small canteen selling soap, razor blades, and postcards. An American sergeant hands Karl a towel and gestures toward a long, low building. "Mess hall's that way. Showers in the back. Hot water. Don't use it all at once." Karl walks through the door and stops dead. Steam fills the room. Rows of metal shower heads glisten under the lights, water hissing against the tile floor. He reaches out a hand, letting the stream hit his palm. It's hot. He strips off his filthy uniform and steps under the spray. For the first time in years, the dirt and sweat of the desert wash away. Around him, men laugh like children, half crazed with disbelief. "They're giving us baths," someone shouts. Karl tilts his head back into the water and closes his eyes. The noise of war, the fear of punishment, the endless propaganda, all of it fades beneath the steady hum of the pipes. He whispers to himself, almost afraid to believe it. This is America, August 1943. Camp Hearn, Texas. The morning begins with the sharp clang of a bell. Rows of German prisoners step out of their barracks into the rising heat, falling into neat lines as a U.S. sergeant calls roll. Beyond the fence, the Texas sky stretches endless and blue. For men who once marched beneath the swastika in Europe, this world feels like another planet. Breakfast comes next. In the mess hall, the smell of coffee and warm bread fills the air. Karl Hoffmann carries his metal tray down the line, scrambled eggs, grits, a slice of buttered toast, and a small carton of milk. At first, he thinks it's a mistake. POWs, fed like this? But the guards simply nod and move on. He sits with his barrack mates, men from the 15th Panzer Division, all just as dazed. Corporal Franz Meissner leans close, whispering as if the walls might hear. "Do you think they're fattening us for something?" Karl smirks. "If they are, I hope it's not for war." The room erupts in cautious laughter. For the first time in months, it feels safe to laugh. After breakfast, work details are assigned. Some men repair fences, others pick cotton or harvest peaches on nearby farms. The Geneva Convention allows prisoners to be paid 80 cents a day, and the Americans keep to their word. Carl signs up for kitchen duty. The pay can be used at the camp canteen, which sells cigarettes, candy bars, and even stationery for letters home. Weeks pass, and the camp begins to feel less like a prison and more like a strange, orderly village. There's a chapel, a barber, even a small theater where the prisoners stage plays with costumes made from burlap and curtains. One evening, Carl sits outside with a loaf of fresh bread, still warm from the ovens. He breaks it open, steam curling into the twilight. It smells like home, like his mother's kitchen in Bavaria before the war. He eats slowly, thinking of her. Later, a U.S. corporal from Kansas named Miller walks by, checking the perimeter. He pauses, noticing Carl's quiet stare. "Bread that good, huh?" Carl nods. "Better than the front lines." Miller chuckles. "Ain't much we can do about the heat, but at least the cooks here know their job." The exchange is simple, but something shifts inside Carl. These men are supposed to be the enemy, yet they speak with kindness, without superiority. They don't gloat, don't humiliate. They just treat him like a man. By September, letters begin arriving from Europe, censored, opened, resealed, but precious all the same. One evening, Carl receives his first. The paper trembles in his hands. His mother writes that Munich has been bombed, that food is scarce, and that she prays he's alive somewhere. She cannot imagine he's writing from America. He wants to tell her everything, the food, the showers, the way the guards treat them with respect. But he can't. The censors would black it out, and she'd never believe it anyway. Instead, he writes, "I am well. The people are fair. You would not believe how different this place is from what we were told." When the mail truck pulls away, a strange silence settles over the camp. The men sit in the fading light, each clutching a piece of paper that connects them to a shattered world across the ocean. For the first time, Carl wonders, not if Germany can win, but what winning even means anymore. Winter 1944, Camp Hearn, Texas. The chill winds sweep across the Texas plains, rattling the tin roofs of the barracks. Inside, a small pot-belly stove glows red as a group of prisoners huddle around it, playing cards made from scraps of cardboard. Carl Hoffman sits near the window, notebook open, trying to capture the strangeness of his new reality. Outside, American guards stroll lazily along the fence line, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders. No shouting, no barking orders, just quiet. Every day begins the same way. The bell, the roll call, the smell of fresh bread from the camp bakery. But by now, the shock has faded into something more complex. Many prisoners can't decide whether to be grateful or suspicious. Was this comfort meant to re-educate them, to make them forget who they were? Carl has noticed how carefully the Americans maintain the camp's fairness. Food rations are identical for guards and prisoners alike, Army cooks serving both sides from the same kitchen. Even the medical station treats wounded Germans with the same attention as their own. When Carl sprains his ankle unloading supplies, the camp doctor, a gray-haired major, examines him with professional calm. "You'll be fine," the major says, wrapping the bandage. "Try not to limp too much. You'll throw off your back." Carl nods, embarrassed. "You care? For the enemy?" The doctor looks up. "Today, you're not my enemy. You're my patient." That line stays with him for weeks. In the evenings, the Americans screen films for the prisoners, black and white reels of Hollywood musicals, cowboy adventures, even newsreels from the front. Some Germans scoff at the sentimentality. Others watch in fascination. Carl sits through Casablanca one night, unable to shake the image of Bogart saying, "Here's looking at you, kid." When the lights come up, a young sergeant named Walker collects the film reels. He notices Carl lingering. "Good picture, huh?" Walker says. Carl nods slowly. "Your films, they are not what we were told. We were told Americans have no soul, only money." Walker grins. "Guess we fooled ya." The next morning, Carl joins a work crew sent to a nearby farm. The land stretches for miles, rows of cotton glinting under the sun. The farmer, a stout man with sun-leathered skin, greets them with a nod. His teenage daughter carries out a jug of cold water, setting it on a wooden table. For a long moment, she just stares, at these men in patched uniforms, men who once served under Rommel. Then she smiles. "Y'all must be roasting out here. Help yourselves." The men exchange glances. In Germany, civilians rarely spoke to prisoners of war, let alone shared their table. Yet here, a girl no older than 17 treats them as guests. Carl pours a cup, the cool water sliding down his throat. When they finish work that day, the farmer hands each man a brown paper sack, 2 apples and a sandwich. "For the ride back," he says. That night, back in camp, Carl writes another line in his notebook. "The enemy feeds me better than my own army did." The words feel dangerous, even treacherous, but they're true. As the months pass, he begins to sense a quiet unraveling among the prisoners. Conversations shift, from war stories and victories to doubts about what they'd fought for. Some men still cling to Hitler's image, holding clandestine meetings in the barracks, muttering about betrayal. Others, like Carl, simply sit under the wide Texas sky, staring at the stars, realizing that everything they thought they knew about the world might have been a lie. He remembers the phrase he heard from an American guard early on: "We fight governments, not people." Now, he understands it. Spring 1945, Camp Hearn, Texas. Thunder rolls across the plains as a storm brews in the distance. Rain patters against the tin roofs, running down the sides of the barracks in narrow streams. Inside, the mood is heavy. Word has spread through the camp. Germany is collapsing. Berlin is under siege. The Reich is dying. For months, rumors had come like whispers through barbed wire. Normandy, the Ardennes, the Russians at the gates of Berlin. But now, the truth feels undeniable. Newspapers pinned to the camp bulletin board show photos of ruined cities, blackened rubble, and weary German civilians trudging through smoke. Karl Hoffmann stares at one of the headlines until his vision blurs. He reads it again: "Hitler dead." The room is silent. Some men refuse to believe it. Others weep. And a few, the diehards, rage, shouting that the news is Allied lies. They tear down the paper, screaming that Germany will rise again. But Carl no longer feels anger, only emptiness. That night, he walks outside into the rain. The lights from the guard towers shimmer against the wet ground. Across the fence, a young American sentry stands under his poncho, rifle slung low. Carl raises his hand in a small wave. The guard hesitates, then returns the gesture. For the first time, there is no enemy left to fight. In the following weeks, life in the camp shifts again. The guards loosen routines, inspections grow rare. Some prisoners are allowed to visit nearby towns under supervision, helping rebuild fences or repair barns. Many of the locals, especially farmers, now treat them like hired help rather than captives. One Sunday afternoon, Carl and 2 others are sent to repair a windmill on a ranch outside town. The farmer's wife brings out lemonade and pie. She speaks little German, but her kindness bridges every gap. Carl eats slowly, savoring every bite, wondering if any of his countrymen back home are tasting sugar again. When they finish their work, the farmer shakes Carl's hand. "You boys did good," he says simply. "You ever come back after this war, look me up." Carl doesn't know what to say. All he can manage is, "Thank you." Back at Camp Hearn, the atmosphere changes. The Red Cross delivers news that repatriation will begin soon. Some men are thrilled, others are terrified. They have seen photos of Germany, cities flattened, families lost, hunger everywhere. The thought of returning to that devastation feels like walking into another kind of prison. That evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, Carl sits outside with Corporal Meissner, watching the fireflies rise from the grass. "Franz," Carl says quietly, "what will you do when we go back?" Meissner shrugs. "I don't know. My home's gone. My brother's dead. Maybe I'll stay here." Carl half smiles. "They won't let us." "I know," Meissner sighs. "But tell me, what if everything we believed was wrong? The Führer, the war, all of it?" Carl doesn't answer. The question lingers between them like smoke. Weeks later, an American officer addresses the camp over loudspeakers. "Gentlemen," he says, "the war in Europe is over. You will soon begin your journey home." The announcement hangs in the air. Some cheer. Others stare at the ground. For Carl, it feels like waking from a long, black, terrible dream. That night, he packs the few belongings he has: a towel, a Bible from the camp chapel, a notebook filled with sketches and words. At the bottom of the trunk, he places a small loaf of bread, still warm from the bakery, a final gift from the cooks. When dawn comes, the trucks roll out of Camp Hearn. The gates swing open, and the men glance back one last time. Behind the fences, the American flag stirs gently in the wind. Carl looks at it and thinks of everything he had seen: the hot showers, the laughter, the kindness, the simple humanity that defied everything his leaders had preached. He whispers to himself, "They didn't win us with guns, but with decency." As the convoy disappears into the horizon, the camp grows quiet again. The guards watch the dust settle, knowing that the men who leave Texas will never see the world or their enemies the same way again.